It takes time, and as you can see, we are sort of in the middle of the implementation of this kind of work, and it's not reflected in achievement right away, right? It takes time, and we're okay with that. So that's mathematics and in grade 3. Grade 6, similar, for we have strong showing in literacy, so that's reading and writing. You can see 86%, 87 last year. Same for writing, 88% at level 3 or 4. And not so good, once again, for math, and you can see the downwards trend. So we have a math strategy. So students are once again tested in grade 9 math. So this is, we have different streams that, in terms of courses. So grade 9, you can take applied math or academic math. If you take applied math, it is very hands-on, and it's often streamed towards colleges and workplace pathway. And you can see in applied math, it is a differentiated assessment, and only half the students can meet level 3. And it is a pencil and paper test. Whereas in academic, if you're in academic stream, 90% of those are achieving level 3 and 4. Which, we're having discussions about, earlier you referenced the learning environment, and our belief is the third, we refer to it as a third teacher. Learning environment is a third teacher, right? So who you're surrounded by, what's on the walls, what sort of, protocols and language do you use as teachers, as students, determine and influence and impact your academic achievements. So we're looking at that. And finally, this is grade 10 literacy, so students must pass this test. That is, once again, level 3, so 70% proficiency to get their high school diploma. So it's a very basic literacy test. They answer questions related to comprehension. They write extended responses, short responses. It's a 3-hour test. And of all the students that participate, it's about 8,000 students that qualify, so 15-year-olds. 90% of them do meet the requirement, but there's still 10% that do not. And those have an opportunity to retake the test, or they can take a course which reinforces literacy skills. So that's what we mean by reaching every student. Just because you don't meet the literacy requirement doesn't mean you fail and you don't get your diploma. It means that you get additional supports. And we also use data to track different subgroups of students. So this happened to be students in Applied English, so those that take the Applied English course. And again, similar story to math. Only half are achieving provincial level, so level 3, right? And so it tells us that's their area of work. And these are the students who often struggle with pencil and paper tasks. So we're looking at how can we still provide optimum learning environments and learning experiences for them, even if it doesn't translate into level 3 in the test score. We also understand that the test is only one measure, right? There are many measures. So, that holistic approach. Okay, I'm going to pause there for any questions.
I think that presentation, in the Sri Lankan context, there is a goal conflict between, if you think of a triangle, students are at the top, parents are here, administration is here. So students need career-centered education or learning-centered education. Parents want exam-centered education. Administration is stuck with a resource-constrained education. So that's a big problem in Sri Lanka. So can you share any tips of the goal conflict between what the students need and what the parents want? Is that how big of a problem it is? If so, and on this side, is there a goal conflict between what students need and what the administration is willing to provide? provide, and if so, how do you do it?
So, in York Region, one of the commitments is engaging parent communities, and so Juanita has been very active in terms of helping us have parent forums. We have folks like Inithan Suganya and Prasanna that have helped to organize regional parent forums. So we bring parents together in areas and then across the region to discuss topics so that they can also understand why we have certain goals and how to help their students. Individually, every school will have a school council with parents that will meet monthly or every other month in order to address the needs of the parents. So we try to be responsive to school communities. In addition, we are lucky to be in a board that is rich in resources, so we have lots of other supports like family counselors, settlement workers, translators, social workers, addictions counselors, all of that, so that we are there to help families as they undergo different types of challenges, so that they can understand that it's really a working partnership between the parent, the school, and the student.
And I think we do a good job of balancing the initial needs or the wants of the parents with research. So we engage academia, so universities. So often, when the ministers are advised by academics, right? And so they often will write papers, white papers, or editorials, right? Advocating for change, and that's often referenced, in my work or in work with the community. It's often translated. If you go to the Ministry of Education's website, they have all the research summaries that informed a certain policy in all the languages that are represented in Ontario, right? So that information gets out there. And a few years ago, we didn't have these assessments that are standardized, right? But the parents and public accountability demanded it, right? So we have them, they're just not high stakes, right? So it's like striking that balance between what the public wants, managed by, informed by research and evidence, and what's good for learning.
So we're going to now hand it off to our colleagues who are going to cover mental health and wellness.
So I'll be starting with the mental health and wellness presentation. My name is Archana Gandharaja, and thank you guys for setting it up so nicely. So even here in Canada, we do have a lot of mental health challenges that we face, where 1 in every 5 Canadians face mental health challenges. And as such, that trickles down into our schools, and it's something that we as educators see firsthand, and something that we have to really acknowledge and help with. As such, teachers and educators also need a lot of training and the ability to kind of the training to help students and to know pathways that we can send students to when they are in need of this help. This is the Ontario's Wellbeing Strategy, and as a province, they've put forth 4 main components, which are equity and inclusive education, where we look at what students, to allow students to have representation in the curriculum so that they feel that it is, they are valued in their classrooms. Safe and accepting schools, where we try to prevent and eliminate bullying. Healthy schools, where we try to promote positive mental health and environment and nutritional aspects for students so that they can take these aspects back home and try to apply this to their home setting. And positive mental health, where each board in the province has a representative strategy or framework that they can use to help students in their respective schools. And today we're going to be focusing on the York Region District School Board's mental health and addiction strategy. And we have 4 main pillars that you see up here that we will each be focusing on. There's 4 speakers that are going to be focusing on each one of the pillars. Under each of the pillars, and to our honorable guests, we have provided a folder in which you can find some of the resources that are up here, and you have this as a handout, so it's more clear for you. But under each pillar, it is divided into 3 different levels of which actions can be taken. So we have the system level, we have the school level, and the classroom level. And under each different pillar, we have focused in on different levels so that you can kind of see what we do here at the York Region District School Board and as a province as a whole. So under the first pillar of building knowledge and capacity, our goal in the York Region District School Board is to collectively understand what a mentally healthy environment is for the school and for all staff to be on the same page. We also find it very important for staff and schools to use resources that are credible in order to program their daily activities and mental health initiatives. And most importantly, it's very important to build the capacity of all staff members in the school to be able to model and promote these healthy mental health and well-being strategies through professional conversations, school improvement planning and co-learning opportunities, such as in staff meetings and professional development days, which we have about once a month in our schools. As such, at a school that I'm in, at Purely Trudeau High School in Markham, we focus on a couple of different things. One thing that we do is we have the board itself does student data. It collects student data every couple of years, and we use this data as teachers in our professional development days. We have different teams of teachers that work on different aspects of the data that we see, and different teachers throughout this year have been working on different strategies that we can implement in our schools to try and see differences in the student achievement and student well-being at our respective schools. Also, another thing that we have for nutrition is some students who come to our schools from below the economic poverty line. We have a breakfast program for these students so they're able to have a nutritious supplement before they go into their classes and are able to better be able to engage and learn what they have to in that day's work. And I've put this up here as part of the York Region District School Board's mental health continuum for a start, because everyone in this room right now is able to place themselves on this continuum. And it's important for us to kind of realize that it's not a black and white or dichotomous way of thinking, but it's a continuum where we can place ourselves on this continuum at any time, and it enables us to have the conversations that we need in order for staff, students, administration, and anybody in the system or outside to be able to see what factors bring us towards health or towards illness, and how we can promote more mentally healthy environments in our schools and reduce the stigma associated. So with that, I'm going to let the second presenter come up, and Krisha.
Okay, well, thank you, Archie. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Krisha. Okay, so I'm going to be speaking to you about developing mentally healthy environments. Well, I've skipped forward, so let's just go there. Now, developing mentally healthy environments involves proactive and responsive approaches to be able to create and sustain conditions for optimal mental health. Now, it's evident that we're not always going to be able to achieve that, but our goal is to shoot high so at least we can get as close as we can. Now, moving on. Whoops, there we go. So the pillar that I've chosen to speak under is school actions, okay? So as mentioned earlier, we do have system, school, and classroom, and what I've chosen to speak about today to all of us is about school actions. Now, schools across the board in York Region are focused on being able to make sure that students are able to be the priority. Now, we are focused on creating working and learning environments that are responsive to supporting all students across that mental health curriculum and the mental health continuum and addiction continuum. We also are looking at, as our goal is to use the document Fostering Inclusive Mentally Healthy Learning Environments as a resource to be able to examine our school spaces. It's important in York Region schools to have inclusive and mentally healthy learning environments, and that is our emphasis and focus. One way that we do this is we implement, monitor, and refine practices to support bullying prevention. Now, I think I heard someone mention something earlier about bullying in a different context in Sri Lanka, but here in Canada, and specifically in our region, bullying is something that students struggle with. And it may be a foreign concept to some of us, but us who grew up in the York Region School Board or just in Ontario in general, at some point along the line with all these different facets of media and all these things, we endure that. So as a school board, we really do place emphasis on being able to prevent bullying. Now, one thing that some schools do is invite local community partners. So not just keeping it inside of the school, but going outside of it and inviting police officers to come into the school and speak about we'll educate students on, well, what is bullying? How can we prevent it? What are some measures that we can take? So it's just one example that I'm offering you that we implement in our own school boards to be able to monitor how to create that mentally healthy environment. Now, this cognitive triangle reminds me of something else that someone had here earlier today. Now, this cognitive triangle can actually be found in our positive mental health, resiliency, and focused communication document that's located on our board website. And the idea is that each individual needs to focus on their thoughts, feelings, and actions. And when they do this, they're able to be more mindful and therefore help create and facilitate a mentally healthy environment. Thoughts include positive and negative thoughts. Feelings include emotional triggers that are active in our bodies, like each and every one of us here. And actions can be moved forward to habits and defaults, patterns of behavior. Now, each and every one of us have our own way that sometimes we just kind of go into. And the idea is to focus on all these three different aspects and be mindful of them as an individual, so that when we are in a context of a classroom or a school or a system altogether, we can contribute to making that more of a mentally healthy environment. Now, the school that I've chosen to just focus on today as an example is Middlefield Collegiate Institute. Now, one of the programs that they include there is Mindful Mondays, and it's a unique initiative taken by the school as a part of the Healthy Schools Initiative Act to be able to have students to be mindful of what a mentally healthy environment is. So every Monday, just a few minutes, not long, students are given an opportunity to just think about a topic that is related to mental health. For example, during exam season, because it is very stressful, as some of us can imagine, students are allotted a couple of minutes to think about what are some stress management techniques or strategies we can use to reduce stress. So that is just one example of many. Also, the school is unique in the yoga program it offers as a credit. Now, this is unique in the sense that it is both a physical education and social science courses combined. It's interdisciplinary. And this allows students to be able to focus on mental health along with their education. Now, one of the things they want to do is, along with encouraging students to be able to think about this, students are going to be now hopefully leading these Mindful Mondays and encouraging other students to be able to think about mental health in a positive manner. And now I'm going to move on and allow Aparna to be able to continue.
Thank you, Krisha. My name is Aparna, and I'm going to be focusing on the third framework, which is reducing stigma. So this involves broadening collective agreement about what mental health is and what addiction is, and challenging existing attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes. So educators are encouraged to reflect in their classroom by asking themselves these questions. How do I model respect for diversity in my learning environment? How are my students' lived experiences reflected in what they are learning? How do I build relationships with families and engage them in the life of our school? How do I engage all student voices? How does my classroom reduce stigma, promote positive mental health, and build student social emotional learning skills? And what do my students need in order to have a classroom that is welcoming and accessible? Educators are also encouraged to engage students in reducing stigma, but teaching them how stigma can hurt all people, especially those who are struggling with mental health and addiction difficulties. Schools collaborate with students, families, staff members, and community partners to plan, implement, and model strategies that increase awareness and reduce the stigma of mental health and addiction. And by implementing programs and initiatives across the board, it raises awareness about mental health and wellness, which then sets forth an environment that reduces the stigma around it. Based on the resource, Fostering Inclusive Mentally Healthy Learning Environments, which is also a resource that you can find on the board website, it encourages schools to 1, increase inclusion, 2, decrease stigma, and 3, challenge discrimination. So a great example of an initiative taken at the classroom level to reduce stigma is Wellness Day. Wellness Day was implemented at Pierre Elliott Trudeau High School as part of their school improvement plan. And like many other school as a part of the YRDSB, Trudeau has been acknowledging the important role of student wellness and well-being. And having seen that there is a strong relationship between physical, mental, and social wellness and student success, resiliency, and positive climate, Pierre-Louis Trudeau has implemented a day solely dedicated to strengthening positive relationships and with their peers and teachers and promoting the importance of wellness in student success. It consists of a full day of activities to find a moment to rebuild and refocus on school while giving them a mental break. It is also a day that allows students and teachers to discuss different aspects of mental health and addiction. And by creating a safe environment for students to talk openly, it promotes and encourages conversations around mental health and well-being to happen. And by increasing awareness through positive conversation and through a positive space, it results in ultimately reducing the stigma. Thank you.
So I'm going to speak about the last component of our pillar. So creative, collaborative care and pathways. I think this component will answer the question that you asked as well. Because we are talking about a pathway in when we support a student who's facing mental health challenges. It's not just a teacher who works with the student. We to get effective results, we need a team. The team includes the parent guardians, community partners, various staff, group of staff team inside the school. So it's not just a classroom teacher who's working and supporting the student. So again, school action. How do we, how do we know which strategies or how to support the students? So example could be a student who's facing challenges of stress and anxiety, and how do we social emotional challenges. The school, some of the school's team could be a COMPASS team, it could be a social worker, a mental health school-based nurse, it could be a student success teacher, classroom teacher, community agency workers such as we have Family Services for York Region and Mr. Kumar Samis over there who comes in and works with Tamil heritage-based communities in our school system. So we do work, I think we don't work in isolation. We engage our community by knowing our students, what are their challenges, how do we, what is the best practices that we can use, and sometimes those best practices are working in partnership with all our community agencies. Okay. So again, if we are looking at this, we are looking at the whole school system. You can see the foundation is educator mental health literacy. So as teachers, we are trained. There's groups of teachers that are trained in various support systems. So example, I am ASSIST trained, which is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. So myself and a few other teachers will be able to support students that are going through various challenges. So it's also our administrator that sends us out of the school to get these trainings. So it's making that time, making that accommodation so certain groups of teachers can go in and get more training. So it's not just the academia that we are trained on, but we are trained on our social emotional, how to support a student socially and emotionally. So again, if we look at this, the whole school mental health promotion, the support for our students, we support school, class-wide social emotional learning, and then it's a three-tier framework. We do support individual students. So example, it could be just the social worker who is sitting down with the student and having a conversation. At the same time, the family services counselor can be working with the whole family. So it's not just the student that's being supported, it's the whole family that's being supported. So I think it's tier one is, we focus a lot on because, that is where we are talking to the whole school population, right? Okay, So an example, I was a P+ teacher at Armadale Public School, and these are some of the programs that we ran catering last year for mental health and well-being. So a P+ teacher is not representing all schools. As Sanjeevan was saying, you know, certain schools needs are identified and certain programs and certain teachers are implemented. P+ school is a school that has challenges. It's below the poverty line, so poverty is a huge issue in that school community. So how do we support student well-being and success when poverty is core? So example, we need to start the day with a healthy breakfast. Healthy, when the tummies are full, minds are thinking, right? Bodies are healthy, healthy mind, healthy body. So example could be that when the kids are coming in and they are choosing their breakfast club, teachers are encouraged to go and sit and have a chat and have a breakfast. I would bring my own breakfast from home, but I'll sit with the students. I'll eat breakfast with them. I'm having a casual conversation with them. It's during those times that I learn a lot more about my students. I understand, you know, I don't just see them as my students sitting in the classroom, but I see them, you know, I learn about their interests. What are their challenges? What are some things that they're facing? So it's not just inside the classroom that you know, I need to get to know my students so I can better assist and help them. SWAG, grade 7 and 8. So this is, we cater towards the grade intermediate students before we send them off to their secondary schools. And it's a full day workshop, and the workshops were run by community agencies. So it's not the teachers standing there and running. Some of the topics were gender identity, self-esteem, gender roles. So these are topics that were presented to the students as hands-on activities by the community agencies, so that way students are introduced to these support services outside of the school. So, you know, if they need somebody to talk to, they know if they're not able to talk to somebody inside the school, they know where to go and get to call. Anxiety and stress lessons. So that we work in partnership with our public health nurses to run these sessions. Teachers are trained to run 23 lessons. So public health nurses come meet with teachers, a group of teachers. They train us, they run the first 2 sessions, and the rest of the 21 lessons are run by us staff. So we get trained to do that. And this is, we did it last year for grades 5 to 6, but the lessons are planned from all the way from junior kindergarten to grade 8. And I'm sure it's there for secondary as well. So again, we work in partnership with experts, so the people with expertise. Weekly Zumba classes for grades 5 to 8 girls. Again, it's a P+ school, so we can't expect our children to go out and pay for these activities or athletic activities. So what we thought was, how can we open up our school, create our school as a community hub? So it's all the programs are happening, it's accessible, it's free, it's open, it's walking distance, so they don't have to take the buses and pay for transportation, and you know, give them the activities that they deserve, right? But financially, they might not be able to go and pay for those activities. Again, it was run by staff, but by the 3rd week, it was run by students. So we were participants at the end. Weekly yoga classes. I think this was, again, staff and students joined in, and it was free for everybody, so it wasn't just for the young ladies, it was free for everyone who came in, and we saw how the relationship between the various genders, the male-identified and female-identified students started to change the model, because it was yoga and then it was group chat, it was a casual discussion, and we would talk about various topics that students were interested in. I think the 20-minute DPA, or direct physical activity, was something very important that our school was very thorough in maintaining. So we would all, when national anthem is done, we would either walk around the school for 20 minutes, or we would, different classes would take turns, go into the gym and do various activities, so in the classroom. So it was, again, the onus was on our teachers, but I believe our administrator was somebody that would walk around to make sure it was maintained. and it was very necessary for the students. I mean, it's healthy activity to start the day, and blood's flowing, and you're ready to work. We, we wanted to introduce our students to various challenges and struggles that are out there that they might face as they are growing older. So ASYR is addiction services for York Region. So, we brought in its prevention. We brought in our community agency that talked about substance abuse, alcohol abuse. So this was, we didn't want to shield our students from this. We didn't want to hide them from the challenges that's out there. So we gave them enough information that when the time comes, they will choose wisely. And we also ran leadership programs after school. So this was for grades 3 to 6, but then the previous year we had grades 7 and 8. So the grade 7 and 8 leaders were coaching and running in partnership with a community agency called Social Services Network to train the grades 3 to 6 to be school leaders. So it's more like trainer program. And then again, like my partner mentioned, the VIP program. Again, the police officers coming into our schools and talking to our students. So for our parents, I've been very, very quick. Weekly wellness programs. We opened the school up during school time. We would have parent yoga and parent discussions. So it was during school time. So that way we didn't have to provide childcare for the parents because kids are already in school. We had an empty classroom that was provided for the parents to come in and sit and talk, have tea, have yoga. It was all free. And we also had, to answer your question, a monthly gathering of parents who came in. It's called Chai and Chat, and every month we had certain topics. Mental health and wellness was pretty much core of that because we had clinicians and nurse practitioners that came in to chat about that and give strategies. And gathering under one day is where we invited the whole community. It happens 3 times a day, and we provide dinner, and we counterpart with the high school, and we work as a team on that and talk about challenges and what's the next step for the whole school community. So thank you for having us, and we provided a red folder and another folder. Thank you. So, is there any questions? And why am I doing this? Is there any questions? With the red folder gives you an example of all the community partners our school partners with. And this is something I have in my classroom, and a lot of teachers have it, administrators have it. So as you can see, it's a team. It's a team that works to support mental health and wellness, not a single person.
I do have a question. I don't want to dominate it. If somebody has a question, I have. All right. I think this is amazing. What you have presented is amazing. I don't think even in US we are as successful as you guys seem to be. My question to you is, here you have something that people in Sri Lanka miserably need, or very earnestly and urgently they need it. So rather than we trying to reinvent the wheel there, what are the possibility of some teachers from South Asian background taking your expertise? You go to Sri Lanka, you train our teachers, the honorable ministers are here, and then during summer break, for example, and then you train your student leaders here, and then what we can do is they can have Skype meetings. I was a principal of a private school there, so we did this. We got off to a good start. The teachers who came from the West were very happy. So my question is, can you sell this to the board? Because you have global education and social action as part of your priorities, and if it can be sold, can you make the meeting with the honorable ministers to visit the school and visit the school board while they are here?
Thank you for your question, sir. That is the purpose of this meeting today, for them to understand some of the strategies we are using in our schools. And in long term, we do, and we are trying to implement some of these, if they could adapt it, or if they want to somehow adapt it to their system. So today we're just trying to give information for them to understand what are some of the strategies that we are using for mental health and some of the other disciplines that we are talking about. So we'll continue with the presentation, and at the end of the presentation we'll have a lot more discussions and questions, and we could maybe strategize at that point. Thanks.
Thank you, Anita. Hello, everyone. My name is Prasanna Jansentrum. I'm a teacher liaison with the Inclusive Schools, and I'm going to be speaking on about progressive discipline. And
do you want to say a little bit about what your role is?
My role is looking at equity within the school and ensuring that our schools meet the needs of each and every one of our students, whether that be behavioral, whether that be socio-emotional. We go in and we work one-on-one with students, teachers, and the parent communities to ensure that every student is taken care of and every student's needs are met, so that we create that equal level playing field for all of us.
So yeah, it's another example of how equity is operationalized. Because we have so many different communities with various heritage backgrounds, and parents need support, students need support to navigate the Canadian system, if you will. And so these guys are the conduits between the system, the schools, which may be alienating students and parents. So they go and reach and support to, once again, to ensure that our students are successful. All students are successful, not just the ones that look a certain way.
And part of that is progressive discipline, which I'll be talking about today, and hopefully we can address some of the needs that Dr. Sivayogan has identified in his presentation. So research shows that behavior is learned and context dependent. If we make learning meaningful, relevant, and impactful, and the learning environment encouraging and positive, then the psychosocial well-being and academic achievement of each student will improve. So here's a quote: "Discipline isn't what you do when children misbehave. It's not punitive, it's not punishment. It's rather what we do, how we set things up so that they're not given that opportunity or they don't find it." So it's putting the sticks away, it's putting the palms of our hands away, and it's bringing out the words and how we can be compassionate through our actions, how we can show that we respect who they are and we identify that they have dignity, and being able to recognize that so that they feel safe in the environment. So in Ontario and New York region, we firmly believe that creating and maintaining a positive school climate is everyone's responsibility, and we've been stressing that from the mental health presentations. Is the students, staff, parents, and community partners involved in the school all have that responsibility. It is not just the teachers who are disciplining or who are establishing or maintaining that environment. When all these players work together in establishing a learning and working environment that is safe, that's welcoming, and that's respectful, students will be more ready and more willing to learn. The psychosocial well-being of students and staff in Sri Lanka has been negatively impacted by the 30-year civil war, as was mentioned in one of the morning presentations. And the healing and the rehabilitation starts with the establishment of a safe and welcoming environment that promotes that culture of care. So establishing the positive school climate is really a whole school approach that requires all the players, as I've mentioned, to work collaboratively at the classroom and at the whole school level to build that healthy and respectful relationships. So some of these include expectations, setting those expectations firmly and definitively through a code of conduct for all the students to follow. It's through initiatives like anti-bullying awareness days where we combat discrimination such as racism and sexism, and ensuring that we tell all the students and the staff in the building that our environment when we come to the school is about well-being, is about being respectful of the differences. However, misbehavior cannot be entirely avoided, and part of the whole school approach is ensuring that when inappropriate behavior does happen, that the discipline is supportive and corrective, and not just punishment and being punitive. So it falls along two levels. It is actually, we approach progressive discipline along a continuum where it's prevention, early and ongoing interventions, and then strategies on how do we address, what consequences, what appropriate supports can we use to address the inappropriate behavior. 2 parts. One is we teach, promote, and reinforce positive behaviors through the prevention strategies, but we also provide predictable and supportive consequences for inappropriate behaviors. And in a couple of slides, we'll look at exactly what this means. So prevention strategies, as I've mentioned, can be school-wide awareness programs or initiatives like bullying, homophobia, racism, ensuring that we create that culture of care. It can be establishing clear expectations for every student to follow and ensuring that every student follows that firmly. Okay. Early and intervention strategies, interventions and consequences are something that Dr. Sivayogan stressed is volunteerism. How do we get, what are some of the consequences that students have to face when they do engage in inappropriate behavior? Something can be volunteer services. Instead of going directly to punishment, how do we ensure that we put things into place so that students understand the harm that has been done? Communication with parents and guardians is key because they're the primary caregivers. And by communicating and holding regular meetings with them, we can establish strategies that are consistent in the home and in the school so that we understand sort of the out-of-school factors that the students may be facing and try to understand the student's behavior based on that. Some others can be verbal reminders of the expectations, what we expect of the student. These interventions and consequences are essentially a second chance or another chance for the student to redeem him or herself. We have peer mentoring programs. Counseling is very key. Psychologists, social workers, we have all of them on site to be able to provide support for that student that may be struggling. And that behavior is a direct consequence of that struggling. If the behavior becomes progressively worse, then we turn to suspension, expulsion, but that is the last resort. We ensure that we have the communication, we have the verbal reminders, we have informal reflective assignments for the students to understand where they have gone, why they acted out the way they have acted out, and how do they correct that, what harm has been done to the school environment and the victims. So progressive discipline is of course inclusive and individualized. One size does not fit all. It ensures that the consequences that are meted out are developmentally appropriate and contextually appropriate, and we consider mitigating factors such as the nature and severity of the behavior. Was the child in control of the behavior? Did the child understand the consequences of that behavior? We need to ask ourselves those questions. The history and circumstances of the behavior, is this repeating itself? Has progressive discipline been used with this child in the past? We look at the student's age, the student's social growth and maturity, as well as off-school factors. What is the socio-income level of the student's family? Where is that student coming from? Can the student afford certain things? As well as special needs. Is the behavior a consequence of that student's exceptional need? And we have the IEP, and I think it's a presentation that's coming on looking at individualized education plans and looking at how do we best support the child based on the child's developmental needs. So progressive discipline is a framework that shifts from a punitive approach and looking just as at punishment. Here's the harm done, and now how do we punish this child? It shifts from that focus to here's the harm done, how do we restore that behavior? How do we correct it in a supportive manner?
And I think we work quite intentionally on separating the behavior from the individual. So if you do something bad, you're not bad, you just, made a bad decision, right? So that, students don't get that, I'm a bad person, but I chose this action that's a bad decision, and let's talk about how we can, make better decisions with support, with counseling, and maybe it's time away from school. And even during that time, we have a separate program where they're still getting instruction, but they're just not in their home school. And we have a teacher of our community who works at that. We call it the Access Program, who can share that. Trendon, do you want to say anything about the Access Program?
the Access program is a program for students who get suspended or expelled. Every day I follow the progressive discipline method. It's a great method to build relationship with the students rather than just giving them punishment for an event that took place. It's a great tool to build a relationship as well as to open up the door for a conversation with the student. And it's great.
So we often talk about the CDC ratio. So that is connect, direct, correct. So in your daily teaching, if you have 100%, how much of your efforts do you spend connecting with the student, so making those relationships, right? Sitting with them and eating, chatting with them. Then you direct. If all you're doing is directing them, do this, do that, right? They don't see you as an individual. And versus the final is when there's been, misbehavior or wrongdoing, then there's that correction because you have connected, right? So, we say it should be about, 70, 20, 10. So that's just one approach, one way of thinking about it.
Thank you, and that's the restorative approach that we want to highlight with this scenario right here. I'll just briefly read it, where Shalini has admitted to stealing food from the cafeteria. 2 other students were involved, but Shalini refuses to tell the principal who they are. Shalini is a new student in grade 9. She has an older sibling at the school who has been sent to the principal's office for inappropriate behavior on a number of occasions. The principal does not know that Shalini works after school to help support her family and that she has recently lost her job. So this is the scenario that's taken directly from the Ontario documents, ministry documents. And the punitive approach, we ask questions like, who did it? So this rule was broken. Now what punishment is appropriate? So it's not really giving the student an opportunity to explain herself. So the principal suspends her for the theft and requests that she reimburse the cafeteria for the cost of the stolen food. So there's really no opportunity for the student to realize the harm that has been done and to redeem herself. If we use a restorative approach, we go from who did it to what is the issue and who is the issue. We ask, what are the student's needs, mitigating factors, personal circumstances? What drove the child to steal food from the cafeteria? And what interventions might be considered to support students? So as Sanjeevan mentioned, maybe sitting down with the student and understanding some of the things that may be going on in her life that has forced her to steal. What's the family situation like? So all of those is what we call the restorative approach. And this is just a snapshot based on a specific scenario. So the main questions would be, what happened? What were you thinking of at the time? And what have you thought of about since then? And if someone else was also involved, what is the impact on them? How has your actions impacted them negatively? Or how have you hurt them? It really gives that student a second chance to realize that this is what I have done, and this is what I have done that's inappropriate, and this is how I can change myself. It's really believing in your students rather than punishing them for something that they've done wrong. So if we look at that chart there, when we look at the bottom, I'm gonna get my directions all mixed up. Bottom left there, when the rules are relaxed and the consequences do not seem fair, where we don't understand the student or we don't take that time to understand the behavioral, the contextual situation behind it, the school gives off the perception that it does not care. If we look at the bottom right, where the rules are relaxed and consequences are too soft, then we're seen as too easy on the student, and we don't want that. If we look at the top left, that's the punitive approach. That's the punishment, where rules are strict and consequences do not seem fair. We're not asking, why did the child do this? We're not having a conversation with the child. We're simply saying, this is what the child did wrong, now this is the punishment, like it or not. Progressive discipline falls on the top right, where the rules are strictly adhered to. We have a code of conduct, we have expectations, and we expect the students to follow them. But the consequences are fair, the consequences are reasonable, the consequences afford the child that respect and the dignity that every single human being needs. And therefore, the approach is restorative. Research has shown that if you use a traditional approach, where the school rule is broken, how do we hold the child accountable? We punish the child. And therefore, we're not really focusing on who's hurt. Here are the rules, and this is what we're going to do to fix it. So we have limited opportunity for the child to express remorse or make amends. Research has shown that this leads to inattentiveness and disinterest in school, high detention and suspension rates because the child does not feel that the environment caters to their needs. They don't feel welcome, they don't feel safe, they don't feel respected because we're not taking the time to understand them. And this leads to increased school dropouts. However, when we use a restorative approach, where we look at it as relationships, here's a relationship that's fallen or broken, how do we fix it? Accountability is understanding the impact and repairing the harm. The offender is responsible. He or she is still held responsible for that harmful behavior, but is working towards repairing that, whether through counseling, whether through peer mentoring, whether through volunteer services, and the opportunity is given to express remorse. This shows that the school is caring and supportive. Students are ready and willing to learn because they feel that they have a voice in the school. Leads, of course, to student success and overall student achievement and well-being. So restorative approaches is all about understanding what consequences are behaviorally and contextually appropriate for that child to have that second chance, to show remorse, to reverse the wrong that has been done. And the resources on progressive discipline can be found in both our documents and with the ministry as well, with supporting bias-free progressive discipline in schools. Thank you.
Any questions?
I have a question again. See, what happens when in the home the restorative approach is not followed? In school you are doing this, and particularly in Sri Lanka, we have something between school and home. It's called tuition. These guys go to tutories. The teachers are just focused on getting exam results. So they are hanging out with friends under a teacher who doesn't care about this. How do you, what kind of make a task when it's not consistently enforced, and how do you
Very good question. We talked a lot about that during the morning when they did the presentation about how this is impacting their system, and they have come up with some strategies to counter that. So we'll talk more in detail about that later. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone, I'm Suganya, I'm a teacher and I teach physics and math.
Bernie Rajkumar, I'm Vice Principal with Toronto Business School Board.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about special education. So you see the picture when we talk about special education, the big word there is inclusion and equity. And we talked about equity many times. So what does inclusion really mean? Inclusion is not just bringing people into what we already have, a space, but we wanted to create new space for everybody. We want to be inclusive for everybody by giving the appropriate and safe place for everyone. I don't think we have time to play this clip, so I'm just going to skip that, but we have this presentation available for you, so you could watch that. So, based on our ministry expectation, we want to believe, educators have to believe that all students can succeed. That's the main fundamental of teachers' belief. And each student has his or her own unique pattern of learning and their potential, their own potential. And also, we have to believe that fairness is not sameness, it's equity. So we don't leave behind any student. So to create that kind of an environment and for every student to approach their potential, we have to create a trusting environment, which we talked about in the previous two sections, and also give them a hope, sense of worth. When they don't have that worth, of course, they're not going to think about their learning, and of course, competent, because we have to challenge them still, right? Because we are going to support them, that doesn't mean we're going to go easy on them. Okay, so to provide that, we are getting into special education. So what is special education? So special education is the term used to describe a wide range of support some students may not receive from a regular classroom environment. Every student needs to be supported, but some students may need some additional support. And when we provide that support, we call them special education. And that special education support every child's individual needs. And that individual needs can be supported by assessment and teaching practices and human resources and equipment, different equipments what needed for that child. And of course, for them to have them available, we need funding. So Ministry of Education do fund special funding for special education based on the number of students in each school, so the school can provide that support. So, as I said, it's from Ministry of Education. It's not my school or my school board make the decision. It's come from a hierarchy. So based on, that's come from the big hierarchy where Canadian Charter of Rights or freedom for everybody, and then that lead into the human rights, that every child have the rights to learn. And then that's lead into Education Act, and Education Act regulate the policy and then school board policies based on that. So that's, you can see which years it started.
So before I go into this, I like we're coming up with a lot of inspiring ideas, and we want to put all of this in implementation. Like the whole, everybody here is very inspired with lots of information going on. We're going to implement it. When we get an idea, we decide to implement. Everyone goes through a process. And in the early process of it is sort of envisioning answers, thinking of the client that we're going to work on, whether at the ministry level, at the community level, classroom level, even a group of students together want to make a change, we sort of go through the process of it. And the key, the starting point is the empathy piece. So the empathy is that human-centered. So you can give a binder and say, here is a binder, go implement it. To get the buy-in is very hard. But when you go with the design, the empathy piece, the human-centered approach, you can get the buy-in. So as simple as a product, you know, you want to bring an invention out, innovation out, you'd go and you live with those people, you could talk to them, build that trust. To us, we're going to talk about a little bit in detail as to what's going on. I'm from Toronto District School Board, Sudganya is YRDSB, but we do have a process in doing this. So the design, I'm sort of using the term very commonly as designing, finding solutions for problems. That whole empathy is huge when it comes to special education, because if you don't have deep desire in making those giving those children who are having some difficulty in any one of these areas that we're going to talk about, we're not going to make progress. We're going to tell other people what to do. So the process that we, through the ministry direction that we're going to be following in our schools that we're going to talk about is a process, but that the words like equity, inclusion, being kind, creating a warm environment. So because as teachers, educators, teachers, we're given a space, and we sometimes close the door, and what we do, even though we're in the first world or third world, we design our little environment. So if we don't have that empathy and efficacy in actually putting what we want to make a difference, we can. So because I wanted to say that the early part of the making of the difference it's a paramount important teacher in designing the space for those children and empathizing with them. So the first tier is that a teacher starts with everybody, so that we plan lessons. So if you look at that little circle on the side, universal design of thinking is sort of, you know, how you have a culture. You have, it's almost like having a culture. It's the background music that goes in the house and everybody's happy and everything's going, sort of giving that environment. So universal design is things that we do in our classroom to make that place happy. So for example, in an engineering setting, when you're designing a building, you put a ramp. And the ramp is sort of intentional in having a person with disability sort of going up. But then in the classroom, you can have, in the normal environment, 5 more minutes. Oh gosh, okay. So that's very important for us because anybody can use it. So in our classroom setting, we do everything for everybody, but other kids are going to use for particular purpose with their particular need. So I'll just let you go.
So you could see the key thing in the circle, we start with the assessment. Our end goal is not the assessment. We start with the assessment to see who we have in the classroom, so we could learn our teaching and assessment based on that. Okay, so because we're talking about particularly about special needs students, based on the assessment, who we have in the classroom is going to give us an idea, okay, I may have to work on this particular student different than the other students. So we are talking about differentiated learning or different type of teaching practices and assessment practices about particular students. So when we do that and we implement plans, so if one particular student is struggling, we may have to implement differently to teach that student. And if that's not working, and we may think, okay, maybe we had to get some outside support from that I can't handle now, so I had to bring some outside support. So we have a process here. I'm just going to quickly go over. So normally if a classroom intervention, so I think the student needs some intervention, I would start to do that. And if that intervention is enough for me, I will start implementing something and then continue with that. But if that's not enough, then I will bring in-school team or different people in my school building, or even from outside my school building, from the board, to support that particular person and do further assessment to see what needs are there, why this particular student is not progressing, and then those assessments then give us some feedback to implement better. Okay, so these are some external people can come into the building to give us support. I'm just going to skip that. So through that process, we have a legal procedure to actually identify a particular student. That student have a special need, exceptionality. So that exceptionality can be identified based on Ministry of Education categories. So these are some of those exceptionalities that ministry says, okay, these are the intellectual or behavioral or communicational or physical disability that we could identify, and then set some strategies to support the student in the classroom. And then we have different classroom placement to support those students. So that could vary. This is what we do it in our classroom in York region, and TDS we have a different method, but it doesn't matter what we call it, the support what is matter. Right? So I'm just rushing.
Yeah. So once we identify sort of the student is having trouble in the classroom, we call this an individual education plan. We can do it informally. So we don't want a child struggling in the classroom, getting D's and we call R's lower than close to failing 50%. So we don't want, because that self-esteem gets affected. So we come up with the individual program, either formally, informally. When I say informal, a teacher goes to the principal in consultation, say this kid is struggling, let's have a plan in place. So we develop, and that means that the strategies that Suganya was saying before, it's all documented pertaining to the assessment we had. So that if the child transfers to another school or have different teachers teaching, and the kid can walk to a teacher and say, I have an individual plan, please set the environment for me to be successful. So, we won't go into it. It's a legal document in the sense that once we develop it, we honor that.
And as Prasidia was talking about, there was a safety plan as well. So that if there's any disciplinary issue, we will go back and see if this child is exceptional and then what's really causes the disciplinary issues. So that's continuing. Maybe I'll just get that. Okay.
Sure. So what happens is, remember I was telling you about the universal design, so that we accommodate is we sort of give a lot of strategies in class, lots and lots of opportunities for a child to be successful. So we're not going to go through a lot of it. Having a chart paper, keeping the environment very friendly too, lots of good strategies. And then modification is where we ought to teach Ontario curriculum. The curriculum is we teach. There are expectations in curriculum we help the child to meet. But the delivery method is different. That's where the accommodation comes. But when this child is really struggling with the IPRC or the IEP process, that process we take, we do changes in the curriculum. So when we start doing that, then we are again, that piece of being mindful and really changing so that the child is beneficial.
And so just to talk about what is equal, like we heard about setting the equal playground for all the students. So equality was equity. What's the difference? Equality means we are giving everybody the same opportunities, like something like standardized exam for everybody. But then equity means where I could modify the test where that particular student may have struggled reading it, or somebody need to read the test for that particular person, or maybe somebody need to write that person's test while the child is telling the answers, because we are testing on the content, not the ability on whether the child learning in a particular. For example, in a science classroom, I may want to test the science content, not the reading content. So where we give the opportunity where I could read the question and the child may be able to tell me. Or maybe the person's handwriting is not good, or it's like not a fast writer, so time is becoming an issue. So we could accommodate giving extra time for the student. So the picture pretty much demonstrates what is equity versus equality there. Like you don't have to give the same size box to everybody. You just change it based on the need of the child. And then I just added this additional, the fence, which we've been talking about poverty and other social constructed restriction in back home. So sometimes we may need to set that equity by not giving a 2 box for the small child to stand on. We may have to break that barrier. We have to think about what is the problem there to give that equity opportunities, the fence. So we have to identify the barriers and break the barriers, or change that where you could see through it rather than giving them that platform. So that's maybe not about the academic, but the additional, the environmental issue outside the school building where we had to break the barriers to give the kids that opportunity. What did we go? Where did we go? No?
So we're not going to go into it. It's further detail into how do we organize our classroom to more modification accommodations that we can provide.
In different environmental and motivational ways. We will read through them later.
So this is what we were talking about before. So universal design underneath everything, differentiation and tiered approach. These are big themes that we, even though we were just breaking it down, there is all kinds of things we do, but this is sort of underpinning what we do on a daily basis.
Then I understand here we are doing this differentiated learning and then focusing on the assessment, because we are reassessing to make sure the child learns something. So we are reteaching, and when we have a standardized exam is waiting for us in front of us, that could be a difficult thing to deal with, because we have to finish the content. So how much this could work in Sri Lanka is one thing, but then we could still, US still have some standardized exam, and they do still follow these policies and these teaching methods, so still workable. Assessment is the key for learning. So when we do the assessment, we don't do the assessment to see, okay, you're pass or fail, and then you are going to the next grade or not. Assessment is for learning. That's the key word there. So we do the assessment, diagnostic assessment. So when a child comes to my classroom the first day, I will do assessment to see where the child's knowledge in that particular classroom. So I could design my lesson based on the student sitting in front of me, based on the curriculum, but not just based on the curriculum. So assessment for learning is a key word. And it's not only the beginning, but also every day with different, it's not just paper and pencil assessment, but different way of assessing the child to make sure the child is learning so I could go to the next lesson. It's not just because I finished the lesson, I'm going to move on. No, I want to make sure the student learns so I could move on now. So it's not about the end result, it's about the progress. So we went through a flow chart about differentiated learning. And I'm just going to finish off with, okay, when the teacher's doing this could be applicable for all the students, not particularly for special education students. Teaching the students to reflect on their own learning, the self-reflection. So that's also lead and help every student to improve their own learning, because we could teach, students still have to reflect and improve on their learning. So I just put a diagram, that kind of a cycle, teach students how they could reflect on their own learning to continue. Maybe that's it. Continue to reflect on their learning so they could progress. Then I have all these documents here you could click on, and that will bring you to those documents, a PDF file. You could access them and read and learn more. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know what, let's take a cue about the reflection. We'd like you to turn to the person next to you and share something new that you learned or something that stood out for you so far. Okay, so turn to the person next to you. What has stood out for you so far? What are you thinking? Share with the person next to you.
చేయకూడియ కార్యం వల్ల
School wise, counter policy activity. Here is the board policy. We take counter policy and send it to all the schools. We call for the principal for 1 day. Special education, that is different compared to in some children are
but they are not in the school, but they are in other places.
Some are in the school, some are only the most of the school we have the big school. We have the special education classes. Teachers also.
If I can have
Which is like this mental health.
I want to make sure we honor the fact that we said we wanted this to come from you, and I know we parked a few questions. So far we've covered mental health under the psychological. Based on the report, we've covered mental health based on the psychological well-being. We've covered student progressive discipline and restorative practices. We've heard about special education, and we do have 3 other topics that we want to talk about, at least 3 other topics. But we also recognize this is a lot of information, and that's why we're taking a little bit of a break, parking the topics. Are there questions that you would like addressed? And Jen, if you want to come up as well, anybody else, please. Questions on any one of the topics we've spoken about so far that you'd like addressed? I know there was a question on the corner there. How do we impart these knowledge? And that's part of the journey that's going to happen as we go progress. So we'll come back to that. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amlavana. I'm from Jaffna, and I'm very glad Dr. Cirillo made that wonderful presentation. And I served with him on the committee that made some of the recommendations. So the gentleman there, sorry, I don't know your name, but he made some very valid comments, really, which I think we need to address. Just to put it in context, Just to give you an example of the scale of the problem with regarding discipline issues, in many schools in the north, prefects are encouraged and allowed by the school administration to hit students, okay, as part of keeping control. And one senior prefect at one of the prestigious elite schools in Jaffna, when he was asked, why do you do this when you know it's wrong? He said, this is our culture and this is the only thing our people understand. Okay, so that's the environment in which this takes place. So I was really pleased to listen to all that about progressive discipline. But it's really how are we to impart that and apply that in our context. So first of all, trying to understand the student, where he comes from, why he did that, is time consuming. Unfortunately, the present generation of teachers is not going to do that. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but most of them will not be prepared to make that effort. And that is the context in which we have to work. So we've got to first of all convince the teaching fraternity there what is the benefit of this, why it's helpful to them, and how they can do it. So it's not just the knowledge, many of them have the knowledge, it's in the application and the practice. And as the gentleman there said, it's also the context of the environment. I mean, for example, teacher at Edel School, when I went for a workshop there about corporal punishment, he said he was a fine young man, you know, taught the senior students. And he said he received this teacher appointment letter from President Rajapakse. And at that function, the president said, when I was a student, I was beaten regularly by my teacher. And that's why I became a successful man. All right? And this is a story that's repeated by prominent members in our community. And I have corresponded with old boys of elite schools, and the response they give is, you know, it did us no harm. In fact, it made us who we are today. So, you know, these are the circumstances in which we have to work. So it would be great. I mean, we need young minds like you all to come and convey these messages in an effective way to help change mindsets. And that is the main problem in our community today. We are still in a survival mode after the war, and it's changing mindsets, which is the biggest hurdle we face. Not knowledge, you know, not computers, not technology, it's up here. So I hope that can
Hello, my name is Rashmi Karnachali, and I'm a teacher with the Pigeon District School Board. I was just thinking about the issue of discipline and progressive discipline. And I think when we talk about concerns like this and about culture, I want to go back, way back before that culture came up, because I think in what is labeled as South Asian culture, there was always a concept of the Gurukul, where children were taken in by their guru and raised as a member of the family, right? And then we often fail to acknowledge the colonial footprint in all our lands, where all our ancestors were disciplined to be obedient subjects. So if that trickle-down effect is happening to this day, and if it is institutionally sanctioned, it is victims of victims of victims that perpetuate that cycle. You know, so if we look back, it is a gift of colonization that our minds are molded in a particular way. Because I was educated in a Catholic school in India, and I remember being handed sticks with which to regulate my classmates. And these were my friends, right? And that is the perpetuation of power, of how power is handed by being that person who then regulates other people. So I guess in this journey, we just go back to what we knew ancestrally long before we were labeled as subjects, and dig into that spirituality of learning and teaching. So there is no blame, irrespective of borders. And we look at what we have within ourselves as assets of kindness, and we work together instead of looking at something that is part of a culture, because we did not create that culture. That culture was gifted to us by colonization. And I think I always acknowledge that. And I guess, it's a place of sadness, and then it's a place of healing. Because many places that are considered politically as a post-conflict society, the residues of that conflict remain. And that trickles down into other spaces too, irrespective of the colors of our passports.
So thank you, Ms. Kanachana. So just one thing to add is, as Ms. Kanachana mentioned, we can change culture, and as administrators and educators, the whole idea is to promote a positive school culture. And that's set right from the top. So when we as school administrators say, you know what, this is what our expectations are of our staff, this is the community of care and culture that we can expect. If we're trying to promote important things like character education and values-based education, the way in which we lead our buildings, the way in which our teachers create these families and communities in their classes are set not only by ourselves, but our superintendents, by the director, like in terms of, and by our minister, right? So from the top down, when we say it is so important to create these positive school cultures, then we make sure that punitive decision-making and responses are not there. So we can totally shift the way in which we do business, and it's incumbent on each one of us to bring sort of positivity and kindness to our classrooms.
So I'm speaking this as a parent in Canada. I was educated in Sri Lanka, and I've been in UK, and here I am. So in Sri Lanka, we have competitive exams, scholarship exam, GC O-level exam, GC A-level exam. If my child is not passing scholarship, or if he is not getting 80s or 4A, we Tamil community think he is a free child, he is not intelligent enough. The same idea is present in UK. The whole of London Tamil community, if the child doesn't go into grammar school or go into Oxford and Cambridge to bring his medical degree or business degree, he's qualified, he's not smart. The same thing, the same idea is here in Canada. If my child doesn't go into gifted school, something wrong with the child. So the issue here is not the child, it's not the education system. It is us, the Tamil community. How do the mindset of the Tamil community? So how do we approach that? Not only here, all the diaspora and back home, how do we change that? That is the critical issue. Unless we change that mindset, whatever we do, in which country we are,
And that's why they're asking how, right? So yeah, we're in agreement on that. So one of the things is absolutely start small, right? Keep doing what you're doing, right? I was told earlier trained that the best instructional program is an effective disciplinary classroom management program. So meaning that the students are so engaged that there's no opportunity for discipline issues. That's number one, and that's within the control of the professional who's the teacher. And number two is that all misbehavior is miscommunication and expectations, right? So again, as Amir talked about, establishing that and reiterating that, right? And the modeling that Janani mentioned, right? So sure, changing culture is hard, but you have to start and you have to keep at it, right? And those are some things that are within our control, like in our schools and our classrooms, and that are beyond our control, which are tutorial services and even parenting maybe. But what we can do is do what's right by us and not let the other things that are beyond our control deter us, right? So you start small and it will spread, right? You reiterate the idea of forming relationships that students don't want to misbehave for you because they know you care and that you'll be disappointed, right? That's the approach here.
Okay, I just wanted to say that today the presentations that we are doing here by the school board was actually requested by the ministries. So they wanted to know how we are doing these. So we wanted to get through the presentation so they know that these initiatives exist. So when they need to pull from that, they could pull from that. So we have about another 4 more presentations we really have to go through. So we wanted to give that information before we get into discussions and questions, because otherwise they'll never know, because you cannot get 2 ministers in a room to sit them for 8 hours to give them information. So we want to really use that time to disseminate as much information as possible to them, so they could take that back to their ministries and think about how they could trickle some of this down to them. And I know I see a question for Dr. Eder.
It's more information. One of the recommendations was what we found out is our system needed change, not just the northern system, but the whole country's education system. So decision making from the center comes, not all, some decisions. Then it comes to the province. At the province, they make the decisions for the rest of the province. And these are done by administrators who has come through the system. There's no input from the community at all. So we proposed a school board, like your things, you call it trustees, the elected members from that district zones, we call it. And they are going to, like you showed it, going to make the decisions. So this means the power from the provincial head is now going to the school board. This took 2 years. There was a lot of problems. I even resigned 1 month before I was consultancy finished, because I didn't want to be part of that kind of stopping things that needs to be done. But then the minister and the secretary got together and they did it. So the next time I went back, I didn't want to be a consultant, but I did help them to institute this, and the board is elected, and they'll be meeting in this December. And they will be forming advisory committees, like you mentioned. So that's the only pilot project in the whole country. The government approved it, but we had our own province had difficulty accepting it. But it is now accepted, and we want help from here to that board how to function. Because it's new to them also, but they are willing and very enthusiastic. Board consists of not 10 but 27, from farmers, fishermen to doctors and others in the community. Thank you.
It's the last question. Me? Go ahead.
My name is Cohen. I'm sorry I wasn't here this morning. I just arrived here this afternoon. I was interested in taking part in this debate, but I have been in Sri Lanka for quite a while and observing the educational scene for the simple reason I'm very interested in it. And I have been a lifelong student in my whole life. What I observed in Sri Lanka, the reason I'm raising the issue is mainly targeting the ministers and administrators who have come from Sri Lanka. And when I go and look at, I'm from Jaffna Hindu College. When I go there, to me, Jaffna Hindu College is like a mausoleum. No one teaches there, it is empty most of the time. Teachers don't come there, it's not a learning environment. Now, you gave us a lot of information, great stuff. How are the ministers going to implement these things? Teachers don't teach, they live on private education. The basic thing is, they inherited a colonial system. Then the government nationalized the school system. Then Tamils are discriminated, therefore they wanted
They were in competition, tuitions and schools set up. Teachers don't teach in schools. Tuitions are the thing that take place. It's all private sector education. A lot of Tamil money is going into resources. What are the ministers and administrators taking from this program to be implemented in Sri Lanka? I see none. There's no education. The whole society is corrupt. The whole society.
Thank you. I don't think and I think we sent we set the context yesterday when we had the pre-meeting. This conference and all the thing that we'll be doing is not about a one-way. What are you going to take from us? I set an example yesterday. It's a two-way thing. There are things that are happening in Sri Lanka, and I don't mean to, and I don't know. I haven't been there in a while. Last time I was there was in 2007. But there are things we can absolutely learn. So this is not a superiority complex, whatever else we want to call it. This is a collaborative effort for us to learn. I know I've already learned something. It's a collaborative effort to support one another, and that's the mindset we have to be in, I think. Okay? We'll hopefully, if we can get through the presentation, these presentations were meant to be about 20 minutes. We brought it down to 10 minutes each. So I'm going to put a phone on the side here just so the presenters can be mindful of the time, so that hopefully we'll have some time at the end, and then we will continue our conversation next Saturday, and Juanita will give the context of it. So I apologize. I do want to honor the fact that we said we're gonna make this your event and hear from you, but at the same time we want to make sure we honor the people that have spent time creating the presentation. Okay? Thank you.
So just briefly about our approach to literacy, I'll just give a very condensed version. Essentially, we believe that you learn to read and you read to learn. So how do we facilitate that? And we begin with, starting with an assets mindset as opposed to deficits. Is what do you bring to the classroom that we can build on? And that's part of that culture. And this is our board's vision of learning in modern times, so 21st century, and all those things that you're asking about is built into the culture. So we articulate what the vision is, and then we provide support by way of resources, by way of these publications, by way of working groups, by way of teacher training, in-service training. So again, it's having those measures at every level of governance. So it's not just articulated, but it's supported. So I'll give you a few seconds to read our ministry's definition of literacy. So as you can see, it goes beyond just decoding the word to being a citizen who contributes. And they contribute because they're literate and because they see that their voice matters. So it's a participatory democracy, and they have an opportunity to, so student voice, for example, is really important. So if students are telling us that they're bored, that they don't want to come to school, right? We need to listen to them. Right? So we need to ask them, okay, so what do you suggest? And that needs to be an honest conversation with, teachers, administrators, elected officials, and students, right? And we put the, practices or protocols in place. This is the world that, our learners are inheriting and going to be living and thriving in, beyond just something that we're dealing with, in our context is they believe everything they read, right? They'll read, in social media that a man was killed by a lion, and they'll say, "Oh, did you hear?" Right? They don't critically. So that's something we're working on, right? So again, it's using real life problems and contexts. It all begins with making sure that everybody is a literacy teacher, right? So in science, right, requires literacy. Math requires literacy. So teachers are charged with teaching the literacy and the language demands in all their subjects. Not only are they doing math, but they're talking about, you need to provide an explanation for the solving of your problem. This is how you write a rationale. So just being explicit. And it's not just, once again, decoding the word, and it's also about responding, connecting, and even sometimes questioning things. And you see in the multiliteracies, being critical thinkers. I just wanted to share this with you from this morning, about rote learning versus, we prioritize constructivist learning where you make meaning of your own or with each other. So learning is social, learning is collaborative, right? So when you don't understand something, you come together to figure it out. Teacher doesn't have all the answers. Okay, so, and we know that that leads to long-term gains on standardized assessments because we have group work, because we have, they do exercises beyond just reading and responding to, pencil and paper tasks. We do a lot of inquiry. What are your questions? What are you wondering about? And then you use literacy skills to find the answers. The literacy and language curriculum in Ontario doesn't have any content. It's the same expectations from grade 1 to 12. Right? It says read to understand, listen to communicate, etc. It's the same. It's just a complexity. So teachers can choose which texts to use. There are no textbooks that are mandated by the school board or the ministry. That's a localized decision. The principals and the teachers decide, we want to read this book. And why students will be motivated by reading this book. And this is our belief about modern learning. Seymour Papert out of MIT, a futurologist, if you will, about, it is no longer about knowledge, ready-made, but it's about invention, creativity, discovery. So I'll skip through that in terms of our basic approach to literacy. There's pre-reading, there's during reading, and after reading. So that is decoding. So do you have the vocabulary knowledge? Teachers choose texts that are appropriate to their level of the students. Because again, there are no textbooks. So they need to know the level of their students, and they do that by giving them diagnostic tests and then decide they're at about a level 2. How do I get them to level 3? So they may begin with newspaper articles and before they read a research report, so it's accessible. It is also about understanding, we make it clear that just because you read something once, you don't understand it first, that it takes multiple readings. You talk to people, you consider things, you question, and then finally, you respond to it by connecting to your life and life outside. So again, that discussion, that connecting to bigger ideas in the world outside of the classroom. Here is another conceptualization of literacy and numeracy and what it means to be a learner. Again, the so-called 21st century competencies. So again, it can't just be to regurgitate information, but to also really think deeply about, is this information valid? So, we do a lot of opinion-based and debates and partnered activities. For example, looking at school uniforms. Are they necessary? So they will need to write a response, supporting it, challenging it, and then coming up with a solution. So, would you like to, so here's an example of how we teach literacy, which is part of reading to learn, but also learning to read as well. So, Karthika, who's a grade 9 teacher, will share an example of an assignment that sort of reflects our beliefs about literacy. and develop language acquisition.
Hi everyone, so I'm just going to build on what Sanjeevan was saying, just to provide you with an example of what we do, a solid example of something that we do in our classrooms. So this is an assignment that I put out to my students in my classroom with our board's idea of literacy in mind, as well as modern learning. So I think the writing is quite small, but for this assignment, what I got students to do is we had just read short stories, and when I provide short stories to my students, I make sure that I think about the culture of the students in my classroom, I think about what kind of background they're coming from, their perspectives, and I integrate that. And then for this specific assignment, I try to get them to choose one short story and think about the voices that are in there and the voices that haven't been heard, and to try to create maybe write a letter or rewrite the short story or an email or a comic strip from a different perspective in that short story. And so the purpose here is to encourage students to kind of think outside the box and realize that there are different perspectives in society and in the community as well. And everything isn't just a straightforward answer, there are different perspectives. And something relating to this that I've done actually in an ELL classroom with my students is even when you're like reading poetry, I found that I encourage my students to interpret the poem or whatever it is that they're reading based on their own experiences. So if a student is coming into the classroom and they've experienced trauma, and then you have another student who has not or has a different background, they're obviously going to have a different take on it. And as a teacher, I find that it is quite valuable and important to listen to our student voice and acknowledge that there isn't just one right answer, and focus on more skill building so that we're teaching them to analyze and to look at things critically, and to encourage them that their experiences do matter. I have print copies of this assignment if you're interested. And just in the corner here, just very quickly, trying to encourage them for a growth mindset as well. So telling them that that they can always improve, and then constantly giving them feedback as they go.
So here are some strategies that teachers use for language acquisition. So some of the things I want to highlight is sentence starters and routine practice. So giving them things like, if they don't know basic conversation, you give them sentences that they fill in answers to. So how are you feeling today? I am feeling, and then there is a list that students can look at. So it's basic, and you do that every day for the first 10 minutes. So we really emphasize the pragmatic, the literal, acquisition of knowledge over the literary and the analytical. That comes later on. And we really use, L1 refers to first language. Research shows as well that if you have a really strong grasp of your first language, then you're able to transfer that for second language. So you talked a lot about, in your Tamil achievement data, that that students were failing and they're instructed in the Tamil medium, and that's their Tamil language. And we were wondering whether we need to strengthen Tamil instruction and language and skills in Tamil, and then worry about English, because the transfer will happen. Because they're able to say, okay, so this is how you construct sentences, and that is something similar in English. First, you replace a few words before you worry about sentence structure and grammatical structure, right? Can you have a conversation? Our teachers do a lot of role playing and drama to teach English. You are a tourist and you're lost. How are you going to, find yourself? So what kind of sentences, what kind of words do you need? And and you do that in groups. So we learn more when we are interacting, when we're being social, and we're better because there are more brains at work. That's it for ESL.
Hello everyone, my name is Abhi Brody. I'm a secondary school teacher in the York Region District School Board. I'm here to talk about the high school programs that we offer and the post-secondary school opportunities as well. So at our board, we believe that it is a partnership. just as was mentioned at the beginning, it's between the parents, the students, and the teachers as well. And so that fuels our perspective on the pathway approach in terms of supporting students for the various ways that they can be successful. University is not the only option. There's college, there's workplace, there's apprenticeship. And so that is what we try to inform the students, parents, and the community at large. At the high school level, so the grade 7 and 8, so in our system at the grade 9 level, so when the students are 14, they move to high school, which is a grade 9 to 12 separate school. In the grade 7 and 8, the teachers work with the students and the parents to sort of guide the choices of what stream of courses the parents and the child will select for them to continue in high school. This diagram just describes the various levels of courses that are available at the grade 9 and 10 level: locally developed, applied, academic, and open. The applied and academic are the two main streams. Applied being that it's very hands-on in terms of the curriculum delivery, and academic is more theoretical. And so applied will lead to more of the college destinations in terms of grade 11 and 12 courses and post-secondary, whereas academic would lead to university pathways. A lot of the elementary school teachers will encourage students to take an applied or academic, but also inform the parents that if they start in the applied section, there are bridging courses. So if you start in applied and you find it easy, you can then take a bridging course and then move on to a university level course. It's not set in stone. So this is to avoid students going into high school where they're transitioning into a new building, into a new school culture, and also being overwhelmed by the content because they may be misplaced by their academic level. In terms of the specialized programs that we offer here in Ontario, we have the OEAP program, the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program, which I'll go into detail, which promotes apprenticeship for secondary school program for students. The International Baccalaureate Program is an international curriculum that develops students' abilities to compete at on the world stage and is helpful for students who study abroad. The Specialist High Skills Major Program is unique to Ontario, where the students get real-life skills that they develop, for example, CPR skills that are tied to certain subject areas, whether it's healthcare, sports-related, or mental health and wellness. We also have in our board arts-focused schools and sport-focused programs. So there's 4 schools around the region that support music, arts, dance, visual arts, drama. And then the school that I teach at, which is a unique school that supports the sports and healthy active living students. And so students from around the region can apply to be a part of the school to get their supports to balance both academic and athletic achievement. In terms of the extracurricular activities offered at the high school level, these are almost a magnet for students to be engaged in their academic work. Some students who may struggle academically, their main draw and magnet to be in the classroom is their involvement in the activities done extracurricularly. And I just wanted to mention that many of the extracurricular activities are run by volunteer teachers, and their time is dedicated outside of classroom to promote the well-being of students. So sports teams, competitions, music, performance activities, leadership and activism work is all done on an extracurricular basis. Post-secondary pathways are what is done after high school. So after the grade 12 year, when they're 17, what is their post-secondary options? What are the choices after high school? So we have university, apprenticeship, college, workplace. In the universities, obviously these are what parents in the community strive towards, where it's theoretical knowledge. However, that's not the only option. The universities have graduate work as well, and master's. However, there's the workplace courses that prepare the students to go into the workplace level, but then hopefully have options to progress post-secondary and other options as well. Then we have colleges, such as the one we're at today in Centennial College, which is more career-oriented and hands-on learning. The apprenticeship program is something I'll talk into a bit more detail because it provides a background of high school students to be able to develop the skills necessary to the specific trade. So they take credits at the high school level and then also partner with plumbing, electrician skills. So they develop it in tandem. So it's a win-win, and they can develop earn the Ontario Secondary School Diploma while also getting their experience in that particular trade. I'll just end with a short video. It's just describing how the trades are promoted here in Canada.
Across Canada and around the world, skilled tradespeople are in high demand. If you like to work with your hands and solve problems, these opportunities could be the beginning of a satisfying career in the skilled trades. Not everyone belongs in an office. In fact, many tradespeople prefer to be actively engaged in their day-to-day work, immediately able to see their efforts come to life. They report a sense of accomplishment from their work and are often paid well beyond the Canadian average. Tradespeople use the latest technology and tools to turn plans into reality, concepts into three-dimensional solutions. Mechanical ability, good hand-eye coordination, and strong math skills are a great foundation for success in the trades. Are you looking for a creative outlet? Tradespeople often use their imagination and creativity to turn raw materials into the products we use every day. Others keep the lights on, the water flowing, and our homes heated. They build, operate, and maintain the physical infrastructure we take for granted. Before you pursue someone else's idea of a good future, consider the unlimited career options in the skilled trades. Crane operators, boiler makers, auto mechanics, and hairdressers are just a few of more than 300 trades occupations. And your career path doesn't stop with certification. Tradespeople are in high demand as trades instructors, supervisors, and inspectors. Many go on to own their own businesses. It can all start with an apprenticeship, a unique post-secondary option that combines on-the-job training with time in school. Best of all, you get paid while you learn new skills and gain practical on-the-job experience. The future belongs to those who build it. Want to get started? The Canadian Apprenticeship Forum invites you to learn more at Careers in...
So the focus of that video is just to show that apprenticeship is a positive option, that the university path is not the only one. And so I think that's really important for us to emphasize both to the youth here in Canada, but also abroad in Sri Lanka. So with that, I'll pass it on.
Thank you so much, Abhi. I wanted to thank Monimali and her team for doing the registration and note-taking. I know there's people here in the front taking notes the entire time. I want to thank the Wire DSP team for doing presentations. So we still have 2 more presentations that we are not going to be able to get to today, and I think they're very important. One of them was leadership development, and the other one was teacher performance appraisal. I think these 2 are really needed. So unfortunately, we're not going to get to that today, and we're going to have to see how we could maybe get that presentations to the team when we meet again, I guess. So Parthy, who's also a trustee for TDSB, was here, and I think he's outside if anybody want to engage with him. I just wanted to introduce him here. And I know that most of you, or all of you who stayed for the entire day, I'm sure that you want to in some way give back or help or see how you could be of use to give back to the development of North and East. So what I will do is, I know that everyone who came here registered through the website, so I have all of your emails. We have concept papers that are presented to us from the North and East saying what are some of their dire needs. And we need to get those projects funded through the CEDA or some way of actually getting those projects going. And they have put in proposals to the Government of Canada as well. So we need the expertise here to see how they could polish up the paper and help with the writing and things like that. And besides that, what I will do is maybe send out a chart, and you could like plot your names there to say which work groups that you would like to work in. And then as a work group, you could meet whenever you can, and you guys could plan to see how you could give back in a more meaningful way. So Dr. Eder was just saying that it'll be great that if we could actually have these presentations translated so the teachers or whoever back home could even take some of these suggestions directly if it's already translated into language. So maybe something that we could work on or look at how we could do that. So maybe even to create like a website where educators could put their materials there to share, so people on the island could also look at to see what they could take from that, and they could also upload things that they are doing that are very different and innovative that we could use here. Like Khan even said that Makerspace, while he was looking at Makerspace here, somebody in Sri Lanka was also sending a concept paper to develop that there. So we are not like oceans, even though we're oceans apart, we are still thinking along those lines. So we wanted to foster that and grow with that. And so we would end here today because we have to leave this room by 6:15. The center is managed by students, so as such, they cannot work past 8 hours. It's their union doesn't allow them to work past 8 hours. So we have to kind of respect that, and so we would close for today, and we will have a smaller working group next Saturday. And in the meantime, we will be able to take the team that has come from North and East to visit different schools, that they could actually see some of these projects that are in progress, and different facilities and things like that. So we will facilitate those types of arrangements. So I wanted to thank you all on behalf of Canadian Tamil Congress and the organizers. And again, a lot of you may be registered for the health conference, which is again here in the morning at 8:30 a.m. And again on Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. It's a long, very, very long days from today and tomorrow and Tuesday. So we really appreciate your patience. So thank you for being here.
One more thing.
Everyone has been recognized except Juanita Nalven, and so we just wanted to say on behalf of all the educators here, thank you for organizing this opportunity for us to meet with the ministers and distinguished guests, because we learned a lot, and if you had not provided this opportunity, we wouldn't have had such a great day of rich learning. So can we give Juanita a round of applause?
Me? Yes, you are here.
I'm here. I'm good.
I'm Jason Andrade, and your name? James.
I'm Yanish.
Not Thank you.
No, Yanish. So, you are never sure suspect. We met in Jasper. TASME meeting, she used to come. Yeah, I am part of the TASME.
That's right. I recognize the face, but I couldn't connect it one to one. Because I also have the
Excuse me.
You're off. Go through my notes and like redo it or something. Yeah. Like tried recording on my phone, but like it random. Yeah.
Do you have recordings? Huh?
Yeah, it's live streaming.
So, do we have the copies?
Of this?
Yeah.
I think somebody does. Yeah, the owner of the phone.
So, is it an official recording? No, not at all.
I think she's recording it and then she's gonna edit it.
So, if we have a copy, is it okay for review again. Have a doubt.
No.